came just to talk about community cats, talk a little bit about our community cat program and what's going on out of Dedham, and a little bit of where this came from in the state of community cats throughout the country. So first off, who are community cats and what are they? Traditionally, everyone's talked about feral cats and feral cat colonies and TNR, and more recently, the term community cats has come up, and what exactly does that mean? Every organization has a slightly different definition, which I think is where we came up with our own decision on what we would call community cats. I'm not a mean person, but I also put this in because it was the only positive thing I saw about community cats and being happy in their environment. So Alley Cat Allies is the biggest advocacy organization. They come out with a ton of data and information, and they identify community cats similarly to how we would identify ferals. So cats that don't want to be around people, can live side by side with them, but are never capable of going into a home. They don't include cats that are friendly, who were previously or suspected to be owned, or who have a socialization history. The ASPCA goes a little bit broader, and they include what they would call abandoned cats, so cats that at one point were owned, in addition to cats that are, for all intents and purposes, parts of the community and not wanting to be a part of people. HSUS includes stray cats, so all cats that live outside that don't have an owner status. They don't include what would be considered loosely owned cats, so cats that someone may say that they've been caring for a period of time but wouldn't outwardly call themselves the owner of that cat, or a cat that kind of adopted them. They say cats that cannot interact with people or do not want to interact with people, and then all cats that are unowned but could potentially be friendly. And I think that's the closest definition to what we're using, because we do see strays through our community cat program. I think most frequently that's how we find colonies. People will call and say, oh, this stray friendly cat came, and then Haley will get there and there'll be all these unsocial cats that people will say, oh, these cats have always been here, which can start the conversation to have those cats spayed and neutered. And I think that that's important, that we're including everything in the community cats in terms of our definition so far, because every cat that is outside that has some sort of contribution to the community is a factor, whether or not they need to be spayed or neutered because they are adding to the population, or they are lost and may potentially have be able to find who their owner is in some way, which is its own problem, because we know how hard it is for lost cats to find their owners even when they make it to the shelter. So what does that mean? Community cats there are a lot of different impressions on them. My experience comes from an urban environment in terms of public opinion. And in an urban environment, I know they are extremely popular for pest control, with barns and places like that we work with. It's also a common thing with rodents, mice, and rats. And the public opinion really varies a lot, because your neighbor may be feeding them and caring for them and really liking these cats, and you may absolutely despise having them around. It may also change with the weather. So in the spring, when the mice and rats are coming out, they're great, but in the wintertime, when they're going through the trash and knocking over trash barrels, they're really hard to handle. So it's something that really does vary on a case-by-case basis. And the hard thing with the laws is that there isn't much awareness for community cats coming from a lot of places. I think that it's a new thing that we're starting to talk about it. A lot of trappers that I've worked with previously, or that I've heard about, they trap at night or early in the morning. They don't want people to know that they're trapping. It's kind of like a secret organization. And I think that is one big thing with the community cats program, is to really talk about it so that people know what we're doing and why we're doing it, and have those frank conversations with people, so that they can be on board and we're not being sneaky. So I tried to look up some laws in Massachusetts regarding community cats, and surprise, surprise, there really aren't any. Locally, are there any municipalities that require stray holds for cats around here? Okay.
No. Yeah, the only town I know that requires licensing, but I don't think they have a.
Okay. So that's the same for like Dedham and Boston and all those places. There's I think Newton might require a stray hold for cats. That's the only place that I know in Massachusetts. So there really aren't any laws in particular protecting cats in any way, shape, or form, which means animal control officers don't take any responsibility, which means we take all the responsibility. The tabby cat is the official cat of Massachusetts. I did not know that.
I didn't either.
But there's inhumane trapping that's prohibited, so wildlife trapping, cats are included in that. Protections against cruelty that apply to all animals, cats are included in that. I found a couple of municipalities, so Blackstone doesn't allow feral cat feeding. And I don't even know where Blackstone is, but Braintree has specifications for how a feral cat feeding station can look. And there's a few other places that say that too, like you can't feed on private property or public property, and there's that. But there really isn't anything to protect these cats or to not protect them. A lot of the issues that Boston and Dedham were talking about is that they don't have any support from animal control officers. When people call and ask their animal control officer for help, they're being told to leave friendly strays, and they're not even being led into the direction of a place that can be helpful for them, which is unfortunate because it's kind of almost as if we're at bay with animal control, which is not how we ever want to work with them. And it's not how we work with them with dogs for the most part. And so why does this matter? One thing that I think is important is that we kind of have created this perceived problem. And again, some people think that it's a problem and some people think that it's great. One thing that I forgot to mention is the projected impact on the environment is that they have a really bad impact on native plant species and native birds. There was a study that was measuring the number of cats in a certain neighborhood, and they found that about 7,000 cats were owned and about 2,000 were unowned. So the number of cats that were having a negative impact on the environment, catching birds, urinating on people's lawns or on plants, were owned. So if you took away that feral cat or that community cat population, it would not have the same effect that people kind of present it to have, which I thought was really interesting. And they can have a benefit for the communities that they are in, like I said, with pest control and the fact that they're always kind of going to be around. Cats are going to get lost because it's great that they're living in homes, but in a lot of ways it's not really a natural behavior. They want to go outside, they want to run, they want to go after prey. So we're always going to have this cycle of cats losing their homes, either semi-permanently or permanently. And so being able to find ways that we can work with communities to have the best possible outcome for them, I think is really important. And then the AVMA has a really good collection of research that exists on community cats, which is almost nothing except for protocols for there's a lot of good information on protocols for TNR, drug protocols, but they did find that you need to stay between 71 and 94% of a population to have a long-term impact, which is a lot, and it's also really variable. But if you're going out and just collecting kittens, which is kind of the easiest thing to do, you're not necessarily getting to the root of the problem. And there is also a couple of studies that talk about TNR plus adopt, which is what we're doing. So cats come in, we evaluate them. The ones that we can pull completely from the population, we do. And the ones that we can't or seem happiest outside, go back to maintain that population. There are a couple of studies that I looked into that are not done well, but do actually say that euthanasia is the best protocol for cats and controlling feral cat colonies. I just say this because the research exists. I don't think it's well done. One of the studies basically talked about all the possible combinations of like survival and fecundity rates of free roaming cats, which led to them saying, oh, they grow exponentially. And because of that, they decided that euthanasia was the best policy. So it's not that there are controlled studies that say that it's more effective than TNR, but there is some research, which I think is charged research, that does support claims that catch and kill or those kinds of practices that are less common are better. Okay. So how do we deal with them and what do we do with the community cat program? So this is still a relatively new program and it's still relatively small. And I think right now they're running from as far north as the North Shore, so Salem area, and they go down to as far as Plymouth for the most part. So she's covering a pretty expansive territory. There's a lot going on in Boston in particular, and I think there's a lot going on in the Dedham area and the towns surrounding Dedham, but Middleborough, Plymouth, Weymouth are also kind of bigger areas for her. So someone will call the dispatch or the rescue services and they will say, I have a cat, I have a bunch of cats, my neighbor has a bunch of cats, some sort of complaint or claim about cats. The community cat rescue agent will get some information from them and then they'll go out and do a colony assessment, which can be anywhere between going to a house, being like, oh, there's cats there, okay, I'm gonna trap, or going to a house and picking up cats because it's a mom and kitten and they can trap on site, to doing a much more deliberate and extensive survey to find out how many cats there might be, how many feeders there are, flyering, trying to get more information to see how that they can actually plan trapping if there's a lot of people that are involved in feeding cats, because ideally you want to withhold food before setting traps so that it's easier to get them and that they're hungry. Part of that initial conversation is determining an outcome for cats. So as a policy, our organization will not pick up cats as a removal service. So if someone calls and says, there's these cats in my yard, I want them gone, come pick them up, we will say, well, we'll take them and we can evaluate them, but if the cat is healthy, the only thing we can, healthy and unsocial, the only thing we can offer you is TNR. So as a policy, we will not euthanize healthy cats just because someone doesn't want them on their property. And so that's the first conversation that they have. And then she'll go out and conduct TNR, trap cats. They will come in, and the first thing that happens is they go through a trap assessment, which occurs 24 hours after arrival or after surgery, depending on the schedule. And that's a snapshot evaluation of a cat to determine potential for sociability. So it is scaled and it's pretty objective, but a cat can either go in and show no social behavior, and that cat is a candidate just for TNR, gets spayed and neutered and then gets released. A cat can show potential for socialization, and so it'll go through a more extensive assessment. And then a cat can go through what we say is one and done behavior. So bunting, chirping, showing like very obvious pro-social behavior. So they kind of evaluate out of the feline socialization assessment, and they go straight through the adoption process. The feline socialization assessment is a 2-day, 4-session assessment, so it's a little bit longer, it's more extensive to get to evaluate a cat over the course of time. So the actual process can take anywhere between 3 days if a cat is either showing one and dones or is not a candidate for socialization, or up to 5 to 6 days, depending on how they are. And then they'll either go through socialization, which is normally for kittens. So kittens 16 weeks and under don't get evaluated, and they just go through the socialization program of the shelter, and then adoption. So that's kind of how we deal with them and what we're doing. And I'm sure most of you have seen this stuff before, but I brought all the stuff that we use for the most part, just to kind of show you. So 99% of the trapping is using the True Catch traps. And the thing that's awesome about these is that they have 2 doors. So this is a door that's really useful for putting them back where they belong, or moving them into another carrier or cage. And just for the sake of
so Sandy, if you can do me a favor and just move the computer back so I can see what she's doing, and then just move the lid down a little bit.
Yeah.
There you go. Thank you.
The life of a cat. Food gets put in here, trap is set, cat goes in trap, trap closes, cat gets covered, and then they get moved. And then, I don't know if this will fit on the table, and I don't need to. This is,
Oh, good. I always wanted to see one of those.
so these are actually lobster traps. So if I call it a lobster trap, I'm sorry, but these are designed for. This is a hospital basket. So this is where the cat stays while they're at the shelter. And these are really great because they have the 2 doors.
That's awesome.
So this is the cat's living space. But if the cat is either a darter or is just really scared, doesn't want to interact with us, or staff feel unsafe handling them, when you're cleaning, you can shut them into one side. You can open this up. And then you're able to safely
Nice.
And humanely clean this cat no matter how social they are. So that's a really nice thing about these.
Mm-hmm.
We just changed the handles. So these used to be bungee cords, but they were opening a little bit. And there were some issues with cats escaping. So this also keeps this door shut because some of the cats were trying to open this up. So this is also really easy. You open this up and the cat can get transferred straight from the trap into the hospital basket, and then back out if they need to get returned to their colony that they're living at. This is where we do the trap assessment. So all assessing happens in here. The feline socialization assessment happens in a full cage. So the cat has to show social enough behaviors that they can be transported and moved into the cage. Some people argue that this is a really small space for a cat to stay up to 5 days. I think with like the size of cages, it isn't. The denim cages are really, really big. And so they're great for cats, but a traditional cage, the metal cages, some of the cages that are at most hospitals and almost every shelter that has at least 1 or 2 of them is the same size as this. And it's also such a safe way for staff to handle them. The goal is for cats to spend no more than 5 days in them. It definitely can be extended, especially if there are weather or staffing issues, because the cat has to be spayed and neutered. And we try really hard not to send cats out the same day as spay neuter. Sometimes the vet team will approve males if they get done really early in the morning, but females will always stay at least 1 night. But a cat the shortest time a cat would spend is 3 days. So it really isn't that bad for them, especially in the wintertime where there's significant weather.
Yeah, I thought it was a pretty decent size, actually. It's
agree.
portable and
I
Yeah,
agree.
I think so.
The goal is obviously doing right by the cat.
Yeah,
So I'm
yeah.
like, what's 3 days in this game of just trying to figure out what's the best placement for you?
Yeah,
roughly how many of those do we have?
like 12.
12? Okay.
So the most of them are in Dedham. I think that Boston has 1. And they're bulky. That's the thing that's really annoying about them is I wish that some way they could safely collapse because they're really
Right.
they take up almost all the garage. But they're transporting is really annoying, so they wouldn't be good to transport cats, but they can be transported in traps. And so I think that they're pretty great.
Yeah.
Some cats hate them, but most of the cats that hate them are the most social cats, so like leave no matter what soon anyway. And so we cover them for the most part too. They do at least Dedham, who sees most of them, does a really good job keeping the garage really quiet. And so I think we probably average about 5 days, especially because the vet team is short-staffed, so getting surgery has been a little bit harder. But the goal is to really 3 or 4 days, and for cats to be able to leave or go into the shelter. So that's what we're doing now. What are other organizations doing? Just really quickly, Alley Cat Allies does a lot of advocacy. That's their main thing, and they're really working to get municipalities and animal control and governments to be on board with this program. Really interestingly, Baltimore has decided that animal control hires a dedicated TNR agent. So they have someone working for the city who only does TNR, which I think is really impressive. I think there are other places that are also doing that, but hopefully it'll become a more common thing because it's awesome that we're doing this, but this is not a problem that private animal welfare organizations should be taking on alone. And I know I'm 100% sure you guys get this too. Everyone thinks we're state funded. Everyone thinks this is what we have to do, and not that we just do this because we want to. So the more we can help with education of people to know that we're doing this because we like it, and that if municipalities can take this on themselves to be really helpful for us and do cats the most justice, can help to benefit. So they're doing a lot of good stuff in that way. Charles River Alley Cats is probably the southeastern Massachusetts most common trapper. I think they go as far south as Plymouth. They've been migrating south, so they did Boston almost exclusively for a long time, and now they're really focusing in Brockton because they have a lot of cats. And they use the community surgical clinic, and sometimes we will actually take cats from them because they do exclusive TNR. They don't really have an adoption program. So if they want cats evaluated, sometimes our staff will evaluate cats for them the same way we'd evaluate our cats as candidates for adoption. And then there are other small organizations and individual trappers. Some of them do socialization. The closest one I know of is the New Bedford Habitat for Cats. I know that they're almost exclusively TNR. I don't know if any of you have ever been there. They use hospital baskets, and they keep cats basically in only hospital baskets, and work with, I think, independent trappers and do TNR. And the Spay Wagon goes and does TNR for them. There are some individual trappers that will do socialization with adult cats. All the data that has been collected that I know of says cats that are 8 weeks and under are good candidates for socialization. At least Dedham and I think Boston as well. And I just don't know enough about your guys' experience, like how much you guys see under socialized kittens. They do 16 weeks for the most part. Cats 16 weeks and under they think of as good candidates to be socialized for adoption. But there really isn't much data talking about past 8 weeks. It's kind of your windows. If you can get a cat under 8 weeks, they're going to be mostly fine. There are some individual trappers that believe that there is a point to working to socialize cats that are slightly older, even in several years old. There's mixed impressions on how successful that is or how humane that is. And that's kind of the really great thing about our community cat program is no cat can fail, except for the extenuating circumstance like a WUO, or if there's something where returning a cat to the field is unsafe for some particular reason. The worst case scenario is the cat gets to go back living exactly where they are at. And that's why I think that our program it's really great, because when you're making those decisions, you're weighing like what's in the cat's best interest. You're not weighing like, do we have to euthanize this cat or not? Which is, I think, really helpful for the staff doing the evaluations. And then Dakin Humane is an organization in Springfield that has a very systematic program. They have one program called their Spirit Kitten program, which is specifically for under-socialized kittens. So rather than socialize the kittens themselves, send them into foster care, and then adopt them out, they put it on the adopters to socialize cats. So they essentially market them as cats that are like, this cat won't like anyone, but you can fix this cat and make this cat like you. And they claim to be very successful and give all the tools of socialization directly to the adopter rather than having staff and volunteers work with them. And then they have a Spirit Cat program, which is for cats with a socialization history. So any cat that comes in for TNR over 12 weeks gets returned to field at Dakin, but cats that have a history of socialization but are not showing social behaviors in the shelter but are eating and acting in a healthy manner, they put them in a colony room, like a multi-cat room, and then adopt them out as cats that would be good companions for other cats that may not ever be able to interact with people. They claim that this is such a successful program that people have returned cats to them for being too social. So it's a very interesting.
Want to get some of those?
It's a very interesting marketing technique that they kind of just decided to do out of nowhere and have collected some good data on it, and it's been successful. But they really are pushing like the marketing of it, and it's just like an interesting thing that they're doing. But they are not taking cats without a socialization history and putting them into this kind of environment. It's cats that don't have another outcome option. And so just really quickly to go through the ways of socialization and then a little bit about formal assessments. The 3 standard ways to work with socializing cats, specifically kittens, are food. So same way with dogs, but with shy cats, you get them to associate people with food, people become less scary. This can also work with playing, and the cat pull and extended toys are really great as you decrease the distance. And then cat-to-cat interactions where you, if a cat sees a social cat interacting with a person, they like cats, in theory, they may decide that people are less scary. In terms of formal assessments, there are very few on cats. Unlike with dogs, there's a ton of dog behavior evaluations. There's 2 that I know of. One is the felinality assessment that came out several years ago, and I think it's the ASPCA. And it basically was meant to evaluate cats for personalities in order to match them to adopters. So this is the first time a cat would go through a formal evaluation that has like good documentation. And then they would say, this is the personality of this cat. We think this cat would do best in X, Y, or Z home. And then after that came the feline spectrum assessment, which is what our feline socialization assessment is off of. I believe it is about 5 years old, and it's had a little bit of beta testing, but it is a very, very new assessment. There is nothing that's come out as a counter or a different form of assessment, and it is a 3-day assessment where a cat goes through, I think there's 5 different categories, and they scale the behavior. And so if a cat gets a certain number of points, they are more social than less social, and it's to evaluate cats where you know nothing about them coming into a shelter environment to determine if they have a social history or if they're social enough for adoption. And so that's where the feline socialization assessment came from. And the TRAP assessment was designed as a 5-minute assessment versus a 3-day assessment to precurse the feline socialization assessment. And then this is just videos talking about using clicker training in feral kittens. So the using food as a motivator, but with a clicker. And these are, there's a lot of factors that they have put into place. There's another cat outside. There's a very small space that the kitten is in.
What's that?
It is a clicker stick.
Oh, okay.
So when the kitten's nose touches it, which it will eventually do, or approaches it, they get food.
He's like looking down as soon as the ball came. That was cute.
And they move it, and then his nose touches it. So he starts to associate the click with food, and then eventually, hopefully, he'll start to associate people with food. And there's another cat there too. So there's a lot that's going on in this kind of socialization.
Oh, that was adorable.
That'd be so rewarding, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's the same exact concept that clicker training
He's
does.
like, yeah, I know. He's like, where's his foot? Oh, he's doing a little paw thing. Oh. That's so cute. Oh.
So that's just a quick kind of thing of a fearful cat. It's hard to tell that he's like particularly fearful because he can't really go anywhere. But there's also, I also have a video on charging the clicker, which I think Lainey hates, so I'm going to skip it.
What?
I think it's really
Oh,
interesting.
the real weirdest thing ever.
Which it just talks about, it's the exact same principles as clicker training dogs, but like you have to charge the clicker, you have to make sure they associate the clicker with food, and then you use it to mark the behavior. And it can be really successful with working with shy cats to come out of their shell too. And then just a quick recap, and then if anyone has any questions or wants to discuss anything, the whole goal here, I'm sorry. Is that, and I mentioned this, is the idea is to determine the best outcomes in the best interest of cats and the community, which is what the great thing about the community cat program is versus a lot of other situations that we have to be in with cats with surrenders or with strays or with unknown histories. For the best part of the the colony assessment is that Haley goes out and she ensures that this is a safe environment for a cat to go back to. So I work almost exclusively in urban environments. And it's really safe for cats to go back to because there's always a porch or a garage or a deck that they can hide under. There's food everywhere. There's usually at least 3 or 4 feeders, which makes trapping really difficult. But it's almost always a safe environment. But being able to go out and trap cats ourselves allows for us to be like, yep, I feel great about this cat going back. Or saying, this cat could go back, but it would be ideal if it had another, it would be ideal if this cat was adopted out because he was a little thin, or having that information to know kind of how safe of an environment it is. I have never released a cat, and the cat hasn't been stoked to be back. For the most part, the cats that are being released through the community cat program, it is in their best interest because we could go through the process of trying to see if maybe they'll be more social in a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. If that's a cage that it's taking up for another cat, or 4 other cats, especially when that cat might just be just as happy doing his thing that he was doing previously. And to decrease cat population in a humane manner, which is where the TNR comes in. And we just recently, I don't know if this was announced, and I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but we just recently started microchipping all of the cats that were TNRing, which I'm super excited about, because if a cat comes back to us and has a wound, especially if it's like an ear-tipped cat with a wound, or just an ear-tipped cat that comes back and ends up being social, we could potentially look at our notes and see, well, 2 years ago, or 6 months ago, or a month ago, when we saw this cat, they were returned, but now they are showing different behavior, and can help with in situations with like a severely injured cat to know, oh, this cat was not owned. Does this cat need a stray hold? Maybe not for X, Y, or Z reasons. So for humane reasons, I think that it could be really beneficial. Yeah, so that's all I have.
Cool.
Questions, comments, concerns, input based on your experience. How much exposure do you see with community cats or TNR here?
Not that
Okay.
much.
Do a lot of people talk about cats being around? Like,
Not anymore.
No, not
Okay.
really.
Not
Wasn't
as much
there
anymore.
cats back by the stone place?
Yeah, there were cats back there. I don't know how many cats and I'm just pointing over there for you, Sam. That's at the truck company.
Yeah.
Yeah. But were they reaching out to Nisa or?
Oh, I don't know.
Oh,
I'm just saying
okay.
because I remember at one point, wasn't